Ex-prisoners of Reddit, what was the scariest thing you saw whilst on the inside? I did a couple years, when I was young and dumb. The craziest shit I saw was actually in the county jail, and not the state prison. The county jail was right on the Texas/Mexico border, so there were a lot of Hispanics. What was weird was the Hispanics born in America and the Mexicans from Mexico absolutely hated each other. I saw a Hispanic from Texas heat up a bowl of water until it was boiling in the microwave. We had microwaves in the tank, and he then proceeded to throw the boiling water on a Mexican from Mexico's face and then beat the ever-loving shit out of him. That dude's screams will haunt me forever. I also saw a guy take a blade from a small pencil sharpener, tie it to a toothbrush, and then slice a guy's face from ear to ear while he was sleeping. The guy lived, but it looked like a fucking murder scene. Not in prison, but in the jail tank for a few days for a speeding violation. With some booze, I got out the next day. Gangs of felons would hang around in there and wait for guys to get sleepy and do nasty things to them when they would doze off. The walls were solid concrete, no camera, only a small window and the door with about 40 men inside. They would only check on us every 3 to 4 hours, or if someone started hollering. Use your imagination. This was Harris County lockup in Houston over a decade ago. A friend of mine did a short stint. From what he told me, he was supposed to get paperwork detailing his charges before he got to prison, but did not. This made the other prisoners suspicious, as they believed he was a snitch, was trying to hide that fact from them, and they threatened to beat him. An old acquaintance of his was in there and assured my friend that he had nothing to worry about, as they had been threatening him for months and nothing had happened. That night, while my friend was making his bed, a few prisoners ran into his acquaintance's cell and beat him to within inches of his life. They were bouncing the guy's head off of the concrete to the point that my friend could hear it. My buddy says that's the moment that scared him straight. Not me, but my husband was in prison as a young adult. He said that they had a way of checking your ego in the spot he was at. The toughest guys would come up to you on your first day and ask how many push-ups you could do. If you were smart, you would just sorta blow it off, or laugh it off and move on. If you were a stupid show-off or had something to prove, you would claim a large number or talk yourself up. If you did that, then they would be all friendly and be like, oh, let's see it. So the poor guy would do as many push-ups as they could. The tough guys would gas the new guy up, acting friendly, pushing him to do more. They acted impressed and joked around. Then as soon as the new guy had done as many push-ups as possible, they would jump him and beat him up. He would be helpless to resist because he had maximumed himself out on push-ups. Afterwards, any guy with an ego was normally really quiet for the remainder of their stay. Saw a girl swan dive off the top tier one stint, and the next time I went, my cellmate swallowed heroin before she was booked in and died. No one noticed for a day. It was a big dorm, and I wasn't next to her. But no one noticed. Everyone thought she was coming off meth and needing to sleep. The girl that jumped off the tower lived, luckily. I was in jail once waiting to see a judge. They'd moved me to 3 different jails in 3 days for some reason. I wasn't a troublemaker and was only in for driving on a suspended license, but I'm big and scary looking. Anyways, when they transferred me to court, I was handcuffed to someone serving life, and he was Aryan Brotherhood. I'm Hispanic, but look completely white and have a shaved head. He told me blacks were greenlit and that I had to swing on sight. If I saw a black man within reach, I was required to fight him, or they would beat or kill me later. It was a scary, and luckily the co's were aware and kept everyone separate until the green light ended. Not an inmate, but current correctional officer. Once I was speaking to an inmate who was accused and later found guilty of killing 5 women. He stared at me straight in the eyes and said that's what the police found. Haunting. Early 90s. My dad was a prison sergeant when I was a small kid. I remember a long period of time where he was not allowed to kiss us or be close with my mom, sister and I found out years later it was because an inmate who was HIV plus intentionally cut himself and tried to infect nearby officers during a fuss. They practiced extreme caution while my dad was getting checked every few months to make sure he didn't contract the disease. Fortunately he was not infected. My uncle spent time in and out of prison for most of my life. Not a bad guy, just makes terrible decisions. He told me once that his entire pod went into lockdown and the guy in his cell started to have epileptic seizures due to the stress. I guess this guy had a history of crying wolf and guards were in no rush to assist him. He ended up choking on his vomit and dying in the cell with my uncle watching. Guy laid on the floor for an entire night before anyone came in to check. County jail, 10-person cell. There was a mentally handicapped guy with epilepsy. He would seize violently multiple times a day. It was horrific. We would all be standing around and he would fall out trashing for a minute, over and over. They never helped him. This went on for months. He was there when I left. Not a prisoner, but a former correctional officer. Saw a dude detoxing from alcohol die. Responded to a maintenance worker stabbing another inmate in the head with a screwdriver. And was involved in containing a riot. How much coleslaw some people can eat. Norwegian prisons aren't really scary. Not me, but a teacher of mine told me a story of one of her students that spent a week in juvie. He wasn't there for more than 2 days when a gang of boys attacked him, sliced his back up with razors and raped him. No one knew until they came to release him, and his mom put a hand on his back, only to hear him scream in pain because of all the cuts on his back. I was taking a shower in a communal shower. This guy walks in and is immediately jumped by 4 dudes. One guy takes out the metal strip to a safety razor and proceeds to cut this dude's fucking ear off. Good times. Not me, but one of my dad's friend was in jail and said he saw an inmate shit into his pillow. I spent a day in country jail. The same jail where a family member worked at for a while as a lieutenant. It was his retirement job, meaning easy work. When you get into country they give you a wristband with your full name and a barcode on it. For that 20-something hours I did everything I could to try to hide my last name because it is very distinctive and the same as my family member. I saw a mentally challenged person, not able to understand simple commands, be beaten with flashlights until their eyes popped out. We were in release processing and the gates were broken. We were told to stay inside the cells. No one wanted to fuck up because we were about an hour from being let out, which they do in batches. This guy had someone he knew in the cell across from his. He kept trying to go in there. The guards kept putting him back and getting more and more pissed. The inmates were getting mad too, afraid that he would fuck up the release schedule, and several people started threatening the dude. I could see by the glaze in his eyes that he had not a clue what was going on, except he wanted to see his friend. The last time he walked out the cell door, inmates were screaming for the guards because no one wanted the release fucked up. 6 sheriffs came and beat the fuck out of the guy. He had getting pounded with a flashlight with his head on the concrete. Boom, boom, boom. Then an eye popped out and everyone started screaming, but the pounding continued. Boom, boom, boom. Other eye flies out. It definitely fucked up the release and we all stayed another 36 hours while they cleaned it up. I've been incarcerated for the past 3 years. Still am in a work release. And the scariest thing I've witnessed by far, when I was the main prison, I saw a dude get beat across the head with walkie-talkies and dragged into solitary confinement. A few weeks later, when he got out, we were in the rec yard. He was playing basketball and collapsed. He was gushing blood out of his mouth. We were then told to return to outdorms. FDLE, Florida Department of Let, came, snapped some pictures, picked up his body and left. Nothing at all happened afterwards. Officers kept walking the compound with complete immunity. This isn't my story, but my uncle We'll call him M. Now M went to jail for possession of heroin. He was addicted to it at the time he went to jail. He was in prison for almost 2 years. Now M had friends who were in jail before, so he knew to stay out of the way and out of sight. One day a new inmate was brought in. He was put in the cell right next to my uncle's. Immediately when this guy was brought in, hostilities went up fast. Everyone glared at this guy. M noticed everyone was glaring or threatening this guy. My uncle M asked around as to why everyone hated this guy, confused as hell. Turns out the guy was a child molester who was serving a life sentence because he raped and then murdered a young kid. One night M wakes up to the sound of beating. He can hear all of this from his cell. One of the prison guards had let himself in. They beat the pedophile up. As my uncle was in there, he saw and heard this guy be beaten, tortured and even raped. He didn't say anything because he believed the guy deserved it. My uncle cares a lot about kids. My uncle left and he heard on the news years later the pedophile hung himself while in jail. Years of torture got to him. As my uncle says, a man killed his brother because he killed his other brother. When I served time in Street, Louis the First watched a guy pull a shiv out of his hair and stab a new guy because he lost at basketball. The guy he stabbed wasn't even playing.